Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Thank you very much to the Lewises for opening their home. They're not just opening their home today, now they're opening their home tonight as well, which I was thinking, in light of everything going on in the world, it's Torah, Tefillah, and Chesed, learning, praying, and kindness are really so the three most fundamental elements where we focus ourselves when Jews need help. And they're opening their home for Torah learning this morning and for prayer tonight for the Tehillim gathering. And kindness, I think everybody knows the Lewis is just our kindness. One simple example that's just classic, but this morning I actually forgot the tripod and I was about to walk back to Shul to get it. And Fred's like, "You want to ride?" And he tells Paul, "We're going to Shul." And with her classic chuckle and smile, she says, "Okay." And I had to ride to Shul and it saved me a 10-minute walk as I was rushing to get everything together this morning. So that's why if you came a little early and saw me calmly on the front lawn, that was thanks to Fred and Paula's standard kindness. And the Torah, Tefillah, and Chesed they do should certainly be a merit for them, for their son, Mordechai ben Pesha. The learning here should be a merit for him as well, for a complete recovery and continue to be a walking miracle. The learning obviously should be a merit for Israel and for our brothers and sisters, those recovering and those who need the protection. I'd like to change the order from what I have here on the sheet, to change the focus slightly in the way we end off. So we're going to start with number 1 and then flip to number 5 and then come back. So I'd like to do here is look a little more carefully at the miracle of Chanukah, what this miracle is all about, why we're celebrating this miracle specifically, and then look a little more carefully at how we celebrate the miracle. I think there's an additional lesson that's very important and very apropos for today's time. So the number 1 is the idea of the miracle itself. I think it's fairly well obvious. The miracle of Chanukah is something that we really take with extreme significance, but it's even in halakha and practical Jewish law, comes up in many ways when the halakha opens up discussing the laws of Chanukah. The first thing it says, Chanukah, one must be exceedingly careful with lighting the Chanukah candles, and goes on to explain, even a poor person who is supported from charity, people are supporting him, he doesn't have enough money to make ends meet, he doesn't have the money for Chanukah candles, then he must borrow or even sell his garments to get, doesn't mean his last shirt, but sell his extra garment to get oil to light the Chanukah candles. The commentaries explain, obviously, the same way the community is giving him food. The community is supposed to be giving him money for Chanukah oil and Chanukah candles. If for whatever reason that didn't pan out and it comes Chanukah night and he realizes he doesn't have the cash, then, and he has no one to get it from, then he must even find a way, borrow, so whatever it is he can do to get cash on the spot. This is how significant we take the importance of recognizing this miracle and remembering the miracle. Something we take very seriously. It's also another halakha that's put down is on Shabbos, if a person only has enough money for candles or wine for lunch to make kiddush, then he should better light the Chanukah candles and not have wine for kiddush lunch, for kiddush hayom. Kiddush of the day, better you make kiddush and challah necessary, but the Pirsume Nisa, the publicizing the miracle, and if you look at Mishnah Berurah explains why does the poor person have to sell his garment? It's for the sake of publicizing the miracle. We want everyone to focus on and appreciate this miracle of Chanukah, and everyone has to get involved in making sure nobody forgets about the miracle. And so something very unique about the miracle of Chanukah. Now, if we think about it, the miracle of Chanukah is, if you read through, anybody who's read through the prophets or read through Jewish history, really, miracles, especially at times of war, are not exactly uncommon. This miracle specifically and the miracle of Purim were designated as holidays. The other miracles throughout Jewish history are remembered, they're noted. If somebody was personally involved, there are ideas sometimes families have, or cities that were specifically involved will have commemorations of some sort. But a communal holiday as we have, and certainly with such an intense focus, this is not exactly the normal way we respond to miracles. There's obviously something more going on with the miracle of Chanukah. In particular, it was just Dr. Pritzker was just mentioning, and the Sean Willits, it's a common theme that's well known, but if you study the history, the war didn't really end with the miracle of Chanukah when we conquered the temple. The war was still going on. We had regained the temple, but we were still fighting the Greeks for another 3, 4, 5 years. This wasn't really even the end of the battle. So the focus on this miracle requires a little bit of explanation. I would add that if you look at number 5, where the Gemara really explains what the miracle is, it's the Gemara in Shabbos. This is recorded about 3 pages in Shabbos, in the middle of talking about the lighting the Shabbos candles. The Gemara digresses to discuss the Chanukah candles, and it opens up with the question, "My Chanukah, what is Chanukah? What's it all about?" Number 5 on the back, and the Gemara rabbis taught it's a brisa. It seems b'chafei b'Kislev. On the 25th of Kislev are the days of Chanukah. There are 8 of them. Tman Yinun. We don't eulogize. We don't fast on them. Because when the Syrian Greeks, they entered into the sanctuary, they fired all of the oils that were in the sanctuary. When the kingdom of Hashmonai house grew mighty, and they vanquished them, Badgu Velomatsu, they only found 1 jug of oil that was resting there with the seal of the high priest, marking it as pure. And that jug, as we know, it was a small jug, only had enough lahadlik yom echad to light for 1 day. Nasa bonis, a miracle occurred with it, and they lit for 8 days. L'shana acheres, the next year, kavum va'asom yom tovim b'hal vodah, they established them and made these 8 days holidays for Thanksgiving and praise. Even at the time when it happened, they didn't immediately celebrate this miracle. A year later, they looked back and reflected. They decided this is something we want to commemorate. Even when the war was still raging, they decided to commemorate the miracle from last year and established for all time these 8 days when, not for parties, etc., like we usually do on holidays, but days for praise and thanksgiving, to remember this unique miracle. Practically speaking, though, with all this effort at publicizing the miracle, if you look at the prayers, we seem to have done a really bad job because we forget to mention it. Anybody's ever read the text of Alanisim? I put it here at number 6. It goes, just to read the English briefly, but the days of Matisyo, son of Yochanan, apologize for the typo there, son of Yochanan, high priest, Hashmai and his sons, when the wicked Yavan kingdom stood against your nation Israel to make them forget your Torah, move them away from the statutes of your will, you and your abundant mercy stood with them at the time of their distress, fought their battle, judged their cause, avenged their vengeance. You gave over, this is my own loose translation, so you can look at articles for a better translation. But you gave over the mighty in the hands of the weak, the many in the hands of the few, the impure in the hands of the pure, wicked in the hands of the righteous, the malicious in the hands of those who engage in your Torah. For yourself, you made a great and holy name in your world. For your nation, Israel made a great salvation and redemption as of this day. Talking a lot about the battle. After your children came into your sacred house, they cleared your sanctuary, purified your temple. They lit candles in your holy courtyards and established these 8 days of Chanukah to give thanks and to praise your great name. You lit candles, and the candles lasted for 8 days. Well, I mentioned 8 days. They lit candles, and they made these 8 days of Chanukah. I don't even say what it's about. Why 8? Where did the number 8 come from? We don't really, if we're trying to publicize it, then we kind of forgot to get the message. So obviously there's something more going on here with this miracle. The miracle, one miracle out of many in history, in the middle of the battle, and when we talk about the prayers, we're not really focusing on it. So it's definitely something that needs, I think, more careful consideration. Yes.
Can we ask questions?
Please.
There's no book that was codified from the Ptolemy, from the Maccabees. No, where it's not. There is, and they were written somewhere around 100 BC. Before the destruction. Josephus really doesn't talk that much about it. And he wrote the 1st century CE.
Right.
With the histories. This isn't part of the oral.
It is.
Is
Yeah,
considered
this-
part of oral law,
Yeah,
where the rabbis got this.
yeah. This Torah Rabbanan was, I assume, written sometime during probably between those two time periods, between the actual event and Josephus.
Okay.
That's rough. I'm guessing. I don't know exactly when this brisa was written. Yeah, it's in Shabbos. They're quoting a brisa. The brisa they're quoting, generally the brisas were written somewhere in that time frame, within those 200 years that you just referenced.
Mhm.
I don't know exactly where this one specific comes from. It doesn't give a specific
Yeah, I
attribution.
just
but that's the
wasn't
time
sure
frame.
where it was out of the oral law, because it was really the two things that were written was Maccabees and Josephus.
Right. This was oral, and that's what the Gemara is quoting it and saying that a brisa, actually, just to clarify what the term brisa refers to, when the Tanaic statements were codified into the Mishnah, there were three books, I guess you could call bodies of statements that were reviewed by the leading rabbis of the day, and they were set into three segments. There were what we know as the Mishnah, which is the authoritative core statements. There's the Tosefta, which is statements that expound and explain a little further that which the Mishnah said. We don't always follow the Tosefta the way we do the Mishnah. It's not as authoritative, but it is more expansive and explains more than the Mishnah is generally understood to be sort of like a sister text to the Mishnah. And certain specific Tosefta is even understood to be referring to specific Mishnayos. The Brisa means sort of the outside text. It's a third set of texts from that time period that were considered to be within the pale of the oral law, within the accepted Torah wisdom, but not part of the core transmission. They're accepted concepts, accepted ideas, but not necessarily part of the core transmission that we put in what we call the Mishnah. Unless there's a Mishnah that is contradicting the Brisa, generally we will follow a Brisa. Generally, it comes from that same time frame from the same people. It generally is as authoritative, but not similarly authoritative. Not as a Mishnah obviously is more authoritative. That's the one that is the core transmission. The Brisa is more of the peripheral statements that were within the pale, but not the core essence of it. That's what this Brisa is. It's from the same time period as the Mishnah. Thank you for asking. I should have clarified myself. So thank you for bringing it up. So that's where this is from. It's around that time it happened. That's what they're saying it is. So this miracle, again, just to clarify, a miracle that we are very, very strict about, make sure everybody publicizes it. Everybody's got to get involved. And why this miracle? And at the middle of the war, and we're not really focusing in it on Al Hanisim. Okay.
Listen, sounds like it actually was.
Yes, that's also true. That's also a very important point. And the Gemara as well. I didn't mention that. Thank you. If you look at the text of the Gemara and the text of Al Hanisim, both of them, the texts are the kingdom of Chashmonai house grew mighty and vanquished them. It says in the middle of number 5. And number 6 also is talking about how the whole thing passed over and they had this whole great salvation and redemption. After that, your children came into your sacred house and they cleared your sanctuary and purified your temple. As if this is after the battle. That wasn't really exactly how it played out. So the text is also a little bit odd.
With the battle winning back Jerusalem, there was still stuff after that. That was part of getting back.
It's definitely a significant part of it. And say but it's not the whole thing. Yossi just goes in here. Yossi just mentioning obviously getting back the temple, losing the temple and regaining the temple. I think anybody understands when even the most non-religious Jew, when they regained the Kosel in modern history, I've heard numerous stories. People they were driving along the LIJ or wherever it was, expressway, and they hear they hear the news. LIJ, I'm sorry, Long Island Expressway, LIE, and they were driving along those. They heard the news that the Kosel was regained. Jews who had no connection with their Judaism pulled over to the side of the road and broke down crying. Now the coastal, just the coastal, certainly regaining the temple was a very significant moment, but it wasn't the entire battle. It wasn't the end of it, and there was much more.
Greek law still stood everywhere else. So like the whole country.
The whole country, yeah. It was definitely I'd like to take a look at number 7. The Pnei Yeshua asks a fascinating question that many people do in different contexts, but the question that he asks is that one can wonder, Yesh l'tmoah, he says, Kol Torah haneis hazel lama. The whole effort for this miracle is completely futile and unnecessary. The miracle of the candles. The Kaimalon, because the halacha is, we hold, Tuma Hutra B'tzibor. The whole problem is the oil was impure. Impure oil is allowed to be used for public need. And they could have lit with impure oil. And he goes on to explain, and I put on the sheet to keep the space, but he goes on to explain there are two opinions. There is an opinion that you're allowed to, but it's better not to. There's also an opinion that it's not just that it's allowed to, it's actually permissible, and it's considered the ideal way to light when that's what's available. There's nothing lacking in the mitzvah. If you don't have pure oil available, it is 100% permissible and 100% ideal in that situation to use impure oil for the menorah. So if we would have lit with impure oil for the next 7 days, if we wouldn't have found that jug of oil and lit with impure oil all 8 days, we would have done the mitzvah in the ideal fashion with no qualms whatsoever. So the entire miracle was seemingly pointless.
Well, that implies that there are actually two miracles then.
What do you mean?
This, the pure versus impure, has to do with the discovery of the pure.
The pure versus impure is
But
the
before
battle.
It was, the battle miracle, let's talk about 3 miracles, okay? First a second. So in number 5 and 6, there's one miracle, the battle miracle. Okay, there's gaining the Beis HaMikdash, and then there's the after battle. Okay, so consider that one miracle, okay? Then in the beginning that we were talking
But
about.
5 isn't talking about the battle. 5 is talking about the candle.
Okay, so 5.
5 is the candle,
is
6 is the battle.
candle. So 6 is the battle,
Right.
5 is the candle. But in the candle, there's the discovery of the pure oil, and then there's the continuation of the lasting of the 8 days. So are they separate miracles? What you're doing is you're implying by saying in Bnei Yeshua that there are actually 2 separate miracles of the oil. There's the discovery of the pure oil, and then there's the lasting of the oil.
So you're raising a very interesting point there. Actually, there was a different question that they asked. Why is Hanukkah 8 days? The miracle was only 7 days. Because they had enough oil for 1 day. It was only the extra 7 days that were a
Oh,
miracle.
interesting.
My son has a book, and it actually has 101 answers to this question.
Oh my God.
But
I just saw
one of the answers they give is that finding the oil in the first place was a miracle.
Right.
So,
that's a
but it's
discovery.
one miracle that they had oil and it lasted. It's 2 parts of the same miracle, according to that answer.
Uh-huh.
2 parts of the same
Got it.
miracle.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's why I was sort of, I was asking if I think you were picking up on it, I was sort of asking the question.
Yeah.
Even if we're gonna talk about finding the jug itself as part of the miracle,
It would be so hard.
it's still unnecessary. Even that element of finding the jug is unnecessary, yeah.
Just they use another answer.
Which question? 7 and 8?
Why are we separated? We're basically the whole stuff. 800 and 100.
But there wasn't a Mahajin, that's his question. The question is, it is Mahajin.
Mahajir.
There's 2 opinions. There's one opinion that this is ideal. This is Mahajin and Mahajin. But he's asking according to the other opinion. He's asking according to the other opinion. So according to that opinion, you can say that if you say, if you say that there is an opinion that it's better to have pure oil, and it's considered doing what we call a b'diavad fashion, where you're doing it in the non-ideal fashion, but you still fulfilled the obligation. There is an opinion that's how we view impure oil in the public need. And according to that opinion, he says there is some purpose to the miracle. But according to the opinion, again, he's asking the other opinion.
But how can you say that? If there's pure oil and impure oil, then you're supposed to.
Well, if
use
you have
pure oil.
The question is when it's not
There is
available,
one that's better than the other.
if it's available.
If it's available, but that still
Again,
means that one is better.
We can look at those opinions, but this opinion exists. There is an opinion. That's what he's asking. According to the opinion, you're asking a good question, but it's you can go through the sleeve over there. But there is an opinion. The bottom line is that if you don't have pure oil available, impure oil is not considered imperfect in any way under certain. Yeah.
If they use the impure oil, wouldn't that have made it non-kosher anymore?
No, it wouldn't transfer that way. Wouldn't transfer the impurity that way. It's a good question. That's also a very complex topic, how impurity transfers, but it would not have been a problem. There is actually an opinion that the menorah that they usually use was defiled by the Greeks, and they used a different menorah for these 8 days until they could make a new one, until they could purify the regular menorah. And it's
So are you saying there's a primary miracle and a secondary miracle, and Hashem didn't want us to forget the secondary miracles?
no, so let's come back
Yeah,
together.
like what's happening here?
We've dealt with a lot of side points. The point I like to focus on here, what the Pnei was asking, is that the miracle, the primary miracle of the oil, the idea that this oil burned for 8 days and it lasted for 8 days, what is the purpose of having? We don't need pure oil. So why did God create a miracle to have impure oil last for 8 days when we could have done the mitzvah in the ideal fashion without any qualms, with even if we had impure oil?
Wasn't the idea that maybe, what's the crux of the discussion of that menorah lit, correct?
Right, and they could do it with impure oil.
Well,
They could do it with
so-
impure oil without a problem.
so the idea was to get it, we've taken the temple back, so let's get this thing lit back up the way it's supposed to.
And the halacha is if what you have is available is impure, that's the way it's supposed to be. Use the impure, no problem. So what's the point of the
There
miracle?
there wouldn't have been like, so there, because I guess according to history, it would take like what, about a week?
8 days,
To make-
yeah,
8 days to make the new oil, so they
exactly.
didn't want to wait 8 days. I mean, unlit menorah on the temple.
Right. That's what they lit one day they could, and then they expected to use impure oil the next day because that's what you're supposed to do. But they didn't have to. And that's the miracle. They didn't have to use what they were allowed to use. What's the big deal? So he says a fascinating answer that the miracle of the oil is really something much, much more. That the essence of the miracle was only done to make known to them the love of the omnipresent for them. God's love. The entire purpose of the miracle was God was giving us a tap on the shoulder, giving us a message. It served no inherent function other than a kiss from God. And this is something he says as we find that this miracle was done constantly. There were few miracles in the temple. There was no psul b'omer. The omer offering, the wheat offering they would bring, and the 2 loaves they brought every week, they never had a defect. It was a miracle that occurred that they never went sour, they never had a defect where they made them. It was always done properly, a sign of God's love for us. They always ensured that our service worked out properly and it didn't fall short in some way. And he says, since a miracle occurred be'ikar ha'inyan, in the core matter, shenigalu geula shlemim yad zoneim, they were redeemed fully from their enemies. In what sense? We said the war was still going on. He says a very interesting line. Shayu omrim li Yisrael kisvu al keren hashorish ein lam chelek be'elokei Yisrael. They were telling the Jews to ride on the horn of their oxen. They had no portion in the God of Israel, and they decreed many assimilations upon us. What he's referring to here is there's a medrash that discusses in the beginning of Bereshis that when it talks about the darkness that went over the earth, that the part at the beginning of Choshech al Pnei Sahom, there's different words that are referring to the different exiles throughout history. The Choshech al Pnei Sahom, the darkness that was on the face of the vastness, that darkness is the exile of the Syrian Greeks, the exile of Yavan. Says the Medrash, what was the darkness? Chashu einayim shel Yisrael, they darkened our eyes. Psychological warfare. What was the psychological war? What did they do? They had us right on the horn of a cow, ein lam chelek be'elokei Yisrael, that we have no portion in the God of Israel. Which sounds a little odd. How is that? What is the psychological warfare there? The commentaries explain it's actually quite powerful. The horn of an ox is representing the golden calf. And at the time of assimilation, at the time of Greek oppression, when they're taking away Shabbos, taking away Bris Milah, taking away Torah learning, taking away Rosh Chodesh, we can't even keep our calendar, taking away every bit of our identity, they had us right on the horn of a cow. Remember that golden calf? We have no identity. We have no connection with God. We are not the Jews, we're just another Greek nation. That was the worst element of the Greek oppression. It wasn't the laws they imposed. It was that they tried to strip away our identity. And as we know from all of Torah and mitzvahs, what we do has a major impact on us, forcing us to actually take our own hand on our own oxen and engrave on the horn of the ox. Not changing so quickly, you engrave it on the horn. Engrave on the horn of the ox. Every time we plow, every time we do anything, in our producing in the field, the food that we make, we have to see that reminder that we are cut off from God. It hurt. It cut us deep and it darkened our eyes. Psychological warfare works, as we know, unfortunately, too well right now.
Mhm.
This was the real Greek oppression, was they stripped us of our identity. Therefore, he says that when the core, it comes out exactly like Yossi said. What was the core winning of the battle? When we regained our identity. It wasn't being under Greek rule that was a problem. It was when the Greek rule meant we weren't Jews anymore. When we regained the temple, that's when we won the war. The rest was details. The rest was nuances. And he says when the core, the redeemed from their enemies, tell them to ride on the horn of the oxen, all the decrees they were saying against us. Now we were redeemed, and a great miracle was done for them that they ruled again. We're now in control. We have our temple back. We can do the service. It was at that moment, he says, this miracle was done in the matter of the candles, which in general, the candles is Eidos Yisrael Shashchina Shora Bahem. It's referencing here a second medrash, that the whole mitzvah of lighting the candles, why do we light candles in the temple? There's numerous things done in the way the candles are placed and the way the temple was built to show that the light of the candles is not for the temple. God doesn't need our light. He gave us light the entire time we were in the desert. Why do we, there was a fire that lit the way every night, every time we travel. Why are we lighting the candles? The Medrash said it's a sign to the Jews that Hashem loves us. It gives a parable of a blind person who's being led by a sighted person. They get to the home where they're going, and the sighted person asks the blind person to please place this candle on the wall to light up the room. And the blind person said, you're the one who can see, I don't need to, I don't want you to feel like a taker. I want you to understand that I appreciate your help. You're someone I value your relationship, I'm proud to help you, and I want you to be part of the process. I want to give you an opportunity that I gave you light, now you can give me light. Says the Medrash, that's why we light candles in the temple. After God took us in the desert for 40 years, he tells us, I want everyone to know that you are my people, I love you, and you're going to light the candle for me now, even though I don't need it. Just for the sake of being able to give back. That candle that was given to us so we can give back, it was in that area specifically that the miracle occurred to show the divine presence dwells with us. They said, we don't have a portion with the God of Israel. And God said, oh, yes, they do. These are my people. And also regarding the Western candle, the westernmost candle of the candles in the temple used to stay lit always for 24 hours till they lit it the next night. After the death of Shimshon HaTzadik, Shimon the Righteous, sometimes it would go out. But a miracle was done specifically at that time, not just the Western candle, all the candles stayed lit. And we had them for 8 days. She'ez Ratzon was having acceptance to make known they had returned to their original state of being beloved. That we had our love with God was intact, our relationship with God. The miracle of the candles is God's statement that we are his people. That's what the miracle of the candles is all about. That's what the war with the Greeks was all about, our Jewish identity. And that's what we're saying here. And with this, the Alanisim really is hitting the nail on the head. As the Gemara says, that when the king of Hashmonai grew mighty, and we again had the temple, we were able to light the candles. We had this message. And that's what Alanisim talks about. It's not about the detail of the candle, it's about the message of the candle. And what was that battle that was fought? The mighty in the hands of the weak, the many in the hands of the few. It wasn't about our battle strength, as the rabbi said on Shabbos. Although certainly we have to do our part, and the IDF certainly does their part above and beyond. But it was the impure in the hands of the pure, the wicked in the hands of the righteous. This battle was not about battle practice. This battle was about God's people versus those who were trying to vanquish them. The malicious in the hands of those who engage in your Torah. He made it for himself a great and holy name, and for his nation a great salvation. And we came into his sacred house, cleared out the site, purified the temple, and we lit the candle. We did our part, we reconnected. And we established the 8 days of Hanukkah to remember that message of the battle, of the miracle. It's all one message, it's all one idea. This is why the candle is so significant. And if you look at number 8, this really was at the end of the first temple. Yirmiyahu Hanavi, the prophet of doom as he's known, was his opening message to the Jewish people is this message. Beginning of chapter 2 in Yirmiyahu, he's told to go and call in the ears of Jerusalem, saying, I remember for you the kindness of your youth, Avas Kulusach, love of your bridal days, Lechtech Achar v'midbar be'eretz lo zerua, walking after me into the desert, into a land that wasn't planted. Referring to when we left Egypt, as Rashi explains, he would return that he says, okay, sorry. Rashi explains why is Yirmiyahu saying this? Why is he opening up with this message? His opening message to the Jewish people before he starts warning them of the destruction of the temple, if you would return to me, ta'avasi l'rachim aleich. My passion, my desire is to have mercy upon you. The Jews were engaged in idol worship, in murder, in immorality, and all sorts of sins at the end of the first temple. It's not exactly a good time in Jewish history. At that moment, God sends Yirmiyahu to tell us, I have a passion to have mercy on you if you just come back. I remember the love and kindness of your youth, the entering into your chuppah. He explains the meaning of the word kulosayach, New Tishon Old French, for those who know Old French. What is the kindness of your youth? He says in the last 2 lines, you followed my messengers Moshe and Aaron from a settled land. You went out to a desert, and provisions for the road. You believed in me. The time when we left you believed in God, you trusted in him and went into a barren wasteland. Some 500 years later, God says to us, I have a passion to have mercy upon you. If you just come back, I remember that so lovingly. Little side point, just encouragement, Shiva Grandma points out, you look at the Medrash about that faith, the faith when they went into the desert, beginning of Az Yashir, the Medrash tells us, Az Yashir Moshe, then they sang, that even though they believed when Moshe first came to Egypt, we lost that faith. As we know, they challenged Moshe very shortly after he came back, and it seems that we were actually held accountable for losing the faith in God, and we didn't regain the faith till the sea split. And that's Az Yashir Moshe. At this point, when the sea splits, then Moshe and the Jewish people sang, we regained the faith we were supposed to have. The faith being referenced in Yirmiyahu over here was in between those 2 points in time. 6 days before the splitting of the sea, when our faith in God was still incomplete. And incomplete in the sense that we were held accountable for, it was lacking. It wasn't where we were supposed to be. We actually were not living up to ourselves. And that incomplete faith, 500 years later, God says, my passion is to have mercy on you. Because I remember that incomplete faith. I remember how you loved me, and I still love you for it. And I'm waiting to take you back. And that's, I believe, what the Bnei Yeshua is saying, what Al Nisim is saying, what the miracle of Chanukah is, that God was showing us he will and does always take us back. And this is our connection. If we look back, any questions on this before we move on? Okay, if we look back to number 2 on the first side of the page, if we look at the way we do and practice this miracle, I think there's another element here that is very meaningful and relevant, especially in our situation we find ourselves today. Generally in Jewish philosophy, Jewish practice, well, there's certainly a value to coming together and to communal observance. The focus is very much on the personal. It's what we take home. It's who we are inside. The point of the highlight of the prayer service is the silent Shemona Esrei. We reflect internally, quietly, each one of us ourselves. The how we think and how we feel about the mitzvahs we do are far more important than the mitzvah itself. It's the way we are into who we are as an individual that really is what matters. Yet, with this miracle of Hanukkah that we're trying to publicize, the mitzvah takes a very unusual form. you look at number 2, Shulchan Aruch 671, section 5, where did they originally place the Hanukkah candle? We do it inside, but they used to do it outside. In Israel, many people still do it outside. And the halacha spells out, you place the candle in the doorway closest to the public thoroughfare on the outside. Meaning, your house opens the public thoroughfare, put it on the doorway. If there's a courtyard before the house, you light on the doorway of the courtyard. If you live in an attic, an upper story, you don't have a door opening to the public thoroughfare, put it by the window near the public thoroughfare. So the focus is putting it by the public thoroughfare. And if you think for a moment about the one who has a courtyard and then the public thoroughfare, it's a very common way that houses were built. In a lot of Israel, you still see this. You have a little courtyard you go through, and then all the houses open up. But the public thoroughfare is this little alley that connects to the courtyard where they live. They put it by the front of the alley. Well, nobody in the house is going to see that. They light the candles, they go inside, they come back the next night to relight them. They come out for chakras, they see that it's went out. They're not the ones seeing the candles. We're doing this all for someone else. It's very different from the way we generally practice Yiddishkeit. And if you look at number 3, even nowadays we do it inside, we still maintain this concept. Number 3 discusses if you didn't light at the proper time when there was foot traffic outside, used to be you needed the foot traffic from the marketplace by half an hour, people are still passing. Nowadays, it says in the gloss, the Ramah, the way you practice, in this time, you light inside, you don't need to be so careful to light in that first half hour, right after sunset, really still the right time to light ideally is about 20-30 minutes after sunset. But the best thing to do is light like 15 minutes after and have an hour candle.
As long as it burns long enough.
Right, yeah, that's the 20-30 minutes you go to the half-hour candle. Yeah. The best thing is like 10-15 minutes after and have a 45-minute hour candle. Then you cover all your bases. Yeah. But the really like at sunset and have but either way, the exact timing is a bit debated, but to do it around then, but really you can do it later now, but it's still preferred to do it at that time. If this time passes when it's not lit, you can still light the entire night. You look at the Mishnah Berurah, he explains that time means until dawn, and nowadays you can light with a blessing. It used to be if they missed the time, being as there's no passersby on the street, they would light without a blessing. Nowadays you can light with a blessing, specifically in Bnei Abayis Na'urim, if people are awake at home. If they're sleeping, you can't make a blessing. You have to light without a blessing because you're not showing anyone else. You're only telling yourself about the miracle, you're not telling someone else. You have to be telling someone else. Just as for them, you didn't make a blessing except when there was publicity, so too for us, the publicity is a critical element of the mitzvah. The Sharatzin actually discusses that what happens if somebody lives in a place where there are no other Jews and they're living alone. Somebody's traveling for business and they're in the middle of some small remote village, wherever they are, or some business district, and there's nobody around, or they're in a hotel or on a 5th floor and it's too far from the street and there are other Jews around, no other Jews in their hotel. It's there is discussion. I think practically there is room to make a blessing there, but there is discussion. Does one make a blessing because nobody else is going to see it? Nobody else even could see it where they are. Interesting discussion. So the publicity is a critical element to this mitzvah, very different from the standard way we practice. Huh? If we look at number 4, I think it really drives home the oddity here that if you don't, this is a little bit more subtle, so if you don't follow this, I'll explain it after. But it just really hits the points. That's why I wanted to include it. That he's discussing the exact timing. We were just discussing the exact timing for the lighting, different opinions, exactly when you light and what does it mean, and the idea that you're not supposed to light too early. So he says one suggestion for where that comes from, that according to the Rambam, could be it's simply logical that if you're supposed to light at nightfall and you light earlier, it's not noticeable you're publicizing the miracle. For when it is early, as the Kenneth would say in many contexts, shraga b'tira ma'mahani. A candle doesn't help anything during the day. So you light a candle during the day, nobody notices it, doesn't show anything, it has no significance. However, he says it's not going through. He's working in the Shulchan Aruch over here, and in the context where he is learning, he says that's not going to help. Explain, you can't use that idea over here because the Shulchan Aruch is using the Torah and the Mordechai that we're talking about the end of sunset, meaning really when it got dark, completely dark. So if you would light after the sun sets, but when it's still sort of purplish, pinkish in the sky, he says at that point, before the stars come out, when it's already dark, if somebody lights a candle, everyone, he says it's noticeable that it's for the miracle. Everyone knows you're lighting for the miracle. Meaning, what's the problem lighting earlier? Not that you apologize that the end of the Zoom in the actual class got cut off. Just to record again the last bit. We established in part one that based on Yeshua, that the concept of the miracle of Chanukah, what we're celebrating, is the message that God sent to us through the candle of his eternal love for us, and that we are forever his people. And we have that closeness and that connection. And we raised a few questions after that the way we practice the miracle has something very unique, different than the majority of Torah Judaism. Torah Judaism generally has a very internal focus, yet we find with the lighting of the Hanukkah candles, it was initially instituted, and as we said in Eretz Yisrael, and Israel is often still done this way, that we light outside. And if a person lives in a courtyard that exits through an alley to the public thoroughfare, the candle is replaced at the entrance to the alley by the public thoroughfare. The people in the family and the household do not see the candles. I mentioned that even nowadays, where most of the world does light inside, if one does not have anyone around awake when they are lighting the candles, it is appropriate to wake up members of the household that they should see and be there when you're lighting the candles. And if everyone is sleeping, then one would not seem to not be allowed to make the blessing when they light the Hanukkah candles, because they're not doing the mitzvah in its full measure, because they're not publicizing it to anyone. This mitzvah has to be sharing the information with someone else. And finally, I've off with, again, it's a subtle point, but if you have the sheet, it's in number 4. The Torah discusses an idea that when I light during the daytime, before nighttime, there's a logic to say that my lighting is somehow separate from the Hanukkah candles. And he explains, because it's not noticeable, it's for the miracle. Since when I light by the day, it doesn't give light the way it does at night. Lighting early is disconnected from what everyone else is doing. In other words, when I light the Hanukkah candles, my message is understood by everyone else because they know I'm lighting Hanukkah candles. I'm telling them about the miracle they already know about. They see me lighting a candle, they recognize I'm lighting the candle for Hanukkah like everyone else. So I'm lighting the candle to tell you what you know, and you light your candle to publicize to me what I already know. This doesn't seem to be a very meaningful and purposeful publicity. We're just sharing information we already know. What's the function? What is the purpose of this external focus? Specifically sharing information with people who already have it and already know it. And I believe that when rabbis are teaching us and defining the structure of the mitzvah of the Hanukkah candles in this fashion, is that this message, this idea that God loves us eternally and has a passion, a desire, he's waiting for us to seek him, for us to want to connect. And at that point, he'll have mercy upon us. That isn't just about me. It's about us as a nation. It's the way God views and deals with each of us and all of us. Meaning, when I light the Chanukah candles, I'm telling you that I understand the message of the candle is about you. And you're telling me you understand it's about me. We each need to tell each other that we understand God loves us. We understand collectively that we have a unified value. We have a purpose that applies to each and every one of us equally. When I was in yeshiva, I often heard that the difference, the litmus test, to tell the difference between pride and haughtiness, self-esteem, healthy pride, and haughtiness, the unhealthy pride, is how do I view the next person? If I have a healthy self-esteem and awareness that God values me and put me in this world for a purpose, that concept applies equally to my neighbor. And when I look at my neighbor, I see another person who got put on this planet for a reason. And I see the value that God sees in him as much as I see the value that God sees in me. But if I speak negatively about my neighbor, if I look at him in a derogatory fashion, that means that I don't fully appreciate the value that God sees in every human being. And it means the pride that I have in myself is tainted. It's about me, that I think I'm somehow better. It's not about the inherent value in every human being. And the message of Chanukah has to be understood. It's the inherent value in every Jew. The love that God has for each and every one of us, and the care and concern, individually and collectively. And therefore we light the Chanukah candles outside. So we understand that unity. We understand that connection. We understand this message of Chanukah, that God loves us and is waiting for us. And he wants us to seek him. And as we said, when the Jews left Egypt, their faith was lacking. It was not the faith they were supposed to have. But it was still a great act of faith. It was still a desire to connect with God. And for that desire, God has a passion for us for all time, waiting for us to show that desire again, to reach for him again. And we need to understand that that is true of every single Jew. We need to appreciate it. We need to cherish it. And we each need to cherish not only ourselves and our own efforts, but to cherish our neighbor and their effort to connect with God. Indeed, I think this is something that we've seen beautifully across the globe since the terrible incidents, since Simchas Torah. It's been an outpouring of unity, of respect, of breaking down all the boundaries that have separated us so horribly, separating ourselves into factions. And Chanukah is that message that we're all important and each and every one of us counts, and we need to value that. And indeed, may we continue to see that achdus, that unity spread amongst our people. We soon see the end of this war, and yet see that unity persist and continue to grow and thrive amongst our people. A Freilich and Chanukah, a wonderful rest of the holiday. Thank you for listening.